are the Eagles much more equipped now offensively to say, you want to give us underneath? I'll throw the ball to A.J. Brown. He's going to break a tackle and bust one for 40 yards. They didn't really have that guy in the past. So the ultimate chess matches get kind of more interesting.
You got Mac and Mac, McMullen and McDonald here with you on Birds 365. We are joined by our short contributor. He's got his hands on the finger of the pulse of the Eagles as much as anybody else, even though he gets sand in his shoes. We appreciate whenever Mike Gill jumps aboard with us here on Birds 365. All right, MG, I'm going to hit you with an easy one to start. The thing that impressed you most about the Philadelphia Eagles victory over the Minnesota Vikings on Monday night was what?
I mean, it's hard not to say the way Jalen Hurts played, right? I mean, that's pretty easy. But I guess I'll be a little off base here and go, I thought the defense, John Gannon's defense, who's more criticized than John Gannon? I think he has overtaken. You guys are wrestling guys. I mean, John Gannon has gone off the top of the top rope and just elbow smashed Howie Roseman in terms of hatred in this town.
Yeah,
so
he's a heel.
Defense, he made a heel turn, man. He is now for at least 1 week. I thought he had maybe the most impressive night. They sent pressure at times when they generally don't. They sent it from places where you don't see them up the middle a lot. They had TJ Edwards coming on the blitz. I thought they designed and hid that pretty well. I have been begging. I said, listen, you got Darius Slay. You got James Bradbury. You got Avonte Maddox. Those are three guys you should trust. Send guys and trust those guys. And for 1 week, he did it. So I'll go John Gannon is my top of the pie.
There you go. Now, and I agree with you. I was just talking about that with Jody. I think he put together an excellent game plan for the opponent. Now, that you just voiced one of my concerns, Mike. He did. He brought pressure up the middle way more than he usually does, and that's because of the other side. You don't get Garrett Bradbury every week. Now, since he is coming, I talked about it on your show. People are probably sick of me. I mentioned this guy can't pass block. He's been in the league for this is his 4th year. He's been either the worst or the second worst pass blocking center in pro football by Pro Football Focus. He can't pass block. Jonathan Gannon knew that, saw that, took advantage of it. My concern is the people expect him to do that every week because if you do it against a good center, you're going to get stoned, and all of a sudden your corner's out there on an island. Then you have some issues.
And I guess
understand that.
A question that I would have moving forward is, okay, you showed that you can do this. You showed that you can dial one up, not all the time, but in spots. I mean, it's third down in the goal line, red zone area, 24-7. You can have a little bit more chutzpah, but he sends a little pressure. The next evolution would be, when am I going to see Hassan Reddick just rip off and just go? When is he going to get on the edge and just be able to take off after the quarterback? I don't know that we've really seen a game or a series or even a play where he has just stood up. I'm coming after you. Here I come. And I think that would be the next kind of wrinkle that they really should try to add. Then you can have, where's Reddick? Are they going to come up the middle? Avonte Maddox, am I getting a corner blitz? Like, you've got to start to add. And I think we take for granted sometimes that these coaches are going to show everything in the playbook every single week. They got to try to
Now, that to follow up on that, week 1, you had Decker and Sewell. Week 2, you had O'Neal and Darisaw. So that was a strength for each team. The edge. That affects Hassan Reddick. As you move forward, Washington this week, it's Charles Leno and Sam Cosmi. Not as good. Maybe that's in the game plan this week for Hassan Reddick. That's what Jody was saying. I agree with him here, and I want your thought on this, Mike. A lot of fans don't look at the other team when they look at game planning. It's about the other team. Right. If you're going to bang your head on the wall against Brian O'Neill, well, you're banging your head on the wall. so you take advantage of Garrett Bradbury.
Right.
That's smart.
This was really the story of the two tales of these two teams is, well, Minnesota's got better skill players than Detroit does. Well, Detroit's better up front than Minnesota is. So It kind of, you look at, and I talked about this yesterday, is you look at the Eagles' schedule. They're not going to be an underdog maybe the rest of the year. I mean, I can't find a game, maybe at Arizona in a couple of weeks, but other than that, maybe at Dallas if Dallas gets Dak back and they're playing well. But how many games are they going to be an underdog? Now, that doesn't mean they're going to win every single game. What it says is some of these teams, even though they're not better than you talent-wise, match up better with you. The matchups are there where they can kind of give you issues. If you have a team that's strong on the tackles and the Eagles can't get their pass rush with the 4, they don't like the blitz, there's a team that could, even though they're not better than you, give you a challenge. Those are the type of things. Now, why Reddick, did get some stand-up rushes, that's not something that they kind of focused on this week because they know, as you said, John, that's not where the matchups were for them. So now I'd like to see them kind of peel the onion another layer as they don't have to face tackles who are as astute moving forward here. So, yes, the matchups hopefully dictate some of the way they game plan week in and week out, which shouldn't be the same.
Well, we give Jonathan Gannon credit for pushing all the right buttons on Monday night, and he did. I said with John first segment, and you got to give the same credit to Shane Steichen, maybe more so because he had 2 good weeks. Gannon's had 1 bad, 1 outstanding. Shane Steichen's been damn good 2 weeks in a row because he's had that great run-pass ratio balance. They throw it, they run it, you don't know exactly what's coming. He's kept the other defenses off balance with how his play calling has gone. Is Shane Steichen not getting enough credit for what he's done the first couple games?
Well, it's a good question, Jody, and I don't think many people even know who Shane Steichen is number one. I mean,
they know who Jonathan Gannon is. He's the equivalent of Jonathan Gannon, the most hated man in Philadelphia, you just told me.
Right. Well, Steichen, I thought the first drive was one of those things like, are they really reading and listening to Birds 365 and listening to all the airwaves of, well, they didn't spread the ball around enough. All right, we didn't spread the ball around tonight. I'll throw it to every guy in the stadium. How do you like that? I thought the first drive was just a perfect way to open that up. It was executed perfectly. Look, it all comes down to execution, too. If Jalen Hurts, I thought, was excellent on that first drive, decisive, great throws, good decisions, put the ball right where it needed to be, and it made Shane Steichen look like he knew what he was doing for this week. But yeah, I agree with you, Jody. I thought the game plan, and look, this is one of the few teams in the league that can use balance because their line, the line means everything. Some of these teams can't do that because they don't have the ability to pass block. Their tackles get whipped. We watch Giant games over the year. They can't do that. Their tackles just can't hold up for a game. They're not good enough run blocking, so they can't run the ball. So I think the Eagles' offensive line allows Steichen to go deeper in the playbook than most coordinators can because he feels comfortable that we can pass block and run block, and you saw it in the first half. The second half, I really liked how they came out and tried to run that run, and then they threw that wonky screen that Gainwell went off of his hands. But they have the ability. That's their formula. 24/7, second half, run the ball, shorten that second half. And I don't think this is now, I think they have the ability to put up more points if they so choose. And I asked you, John, yesterday, were you a little that they kind of took their foot off the gas after doing it in week 1?
We were talking about the offense. So I want to stick with you there, Mike, in the fact that, Jody has mentioned the balance. It's easy to have balance when you're up 17 every week. I do think the Eagles did take their foot off the gas. Now, there were a couple plays.
You all right with that?
No, I'm not. But I didn't get the feeling the Irv Smith drop. For instance, if he catches that and that's a touchdown, I think the Eagles have a sense of urgency.
Can I add to that, John?
The block field goal, real quick. The block field goal, Jody. Sense of urgency if that gets returned. But go ahead.
The Irv Smith block. You know who didn't get credit for that? At least not on the broadcast. Maybe you guys talked about it in the press box. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was coming over. He was a little late. He didn't quite get there, but he did get his hand up. And I think that's why Irv Smith dropped that ball, because he, I think, affected his vision right before the ball hit his hands. And that's a reason why he dropped that. You got to get there, and Chauncey Gardner didn't. But
he dropped it.
He gave it his best effort. He dropped the ball.
He's dropped it because he's wearing 84 in Minnesota, which is sacrilegious. There's no way you hand 84 to Irv Smith Jr. Come on.
You got to make that play as an NFL player, and he's supposed to be a good tight end. You got to make that play. I hear what you're saying. You know, you have a little bit in your vision, but that's an easy catch for an NFL player. My point is, I never got the feeling if the Vikings made a play, the interception as well, the Kenny Gainwell drop, if they made a play and scored a touchdown, I think the sense of urgency would have been back. There was no evidence that defense could stop the Eagles' offense whatsoever. I think they just would have put the foot back on the gas and it would have been fine. But my point is moving forward, Mike, at some point, I don't know, you mentioned the schedule. We all know the schedule looks light on paper. At some point, you're going to be tested. You're going to be behind. That, to me, is going to say a lot about this team. What do they do playing from behind? That changes everything, and that's the one big hurdle I want to see.
Well, and it's a good point, and the question will be, how's that team defending you when you're alive? A lot of times we see these teams do what the Vikings did. Hey, we'll let you catch the ball in front of us and try to make tackles. Are the Eagles much more equipped now offensively to say, you want to give us underneath? I'll throw the ball to A.J. Brown. He's going to break a tackle and bust one for 40 yards. They didn't really have that guy in the past. So the ultimate chess matches get kind of more interesting when you have more talent. You know, the Eagles didn't have the talent to play from behind because I'll let you catch the ball underneath. I'll come up and whack you and you're going to go right down. No yak Zach, right? Now you got guys who are going to break tackles and make big plays. And that's how in the NFL we see every week. 31-17 quickly changes. We saw Miami come back. I don't know what the hell the score was when they were down.
Well, that Miami game, I was talking about that, Mike. Do you think the Eagles can come back from that kind of poor start and win that type of game? That to me is still a question that needs.
Who are they playing against?
Well, that's part of it as well,
right?
But
I mean, if you're playing Dallas,
if you're playing Baltimore, Dallas, you know, Baltimore's pretty good. If you're playing Baltimore, because remember, there's both ends of that spectrum. You got to stop Lamar Jackson. You got to come back with all the offense.
Here might be my response, guys. And I pondered this yesterday. I think we saw now the ceiling of what Jalen Hurts can be. Is he going to be that every week? No. But now that game is there. Now can I get consistency to approach that game, right? Can I get consistency to approach that level? I'm not going to get to that level, but can I have consistent week in and week out approaches to that game? If he plays like he did on Monday night, this league's in some trouble. How do you figure out what to do? Decisive, quick, accurate, show the ability to throw the ball down the field, got escapability. I mean, you almost were like, whoa, I'm watching a completely different player than what I saw for a year and 4 games.
You're right. 6 games now. He's extended the ceiling. Now can we lessen the floor? Can we bring that floor level up that when he doesn't have the kind of game that he had last week, it's not dropping through the floor? One other note on the point that John was making about the Eagles and their abilities on offense. Are we once again guilty of not factoring in the opponent enough? Is there any chance that Ed Donatel, who reacted and changed 0 in the first half, nothing, he just kept doing the same exact thing, play in and play out, the Eagles hadn't asked for it, and they went up and down the field. Maybe he just at halftime actually said, maybe I should change some things and do some things differently. Do we give the Vikings no credit for the Eagles going scoreless in the second half?
I think the sense of urgency, my perspective, the sense of urgency had more to do with it than any changes.
I think the play calling was significantly more conservative in the second half, and yet they ran the ball with very good success still. I hated the play call They Hurts had like a design run on a third down. I'm thinking, what are you doing? 24-7, like later on in the game.
I said the same thing, Mike. I said, what?
It was just a conservative play call, and it's like I trust this guy just to not take a hit and get down. So, like, I felt like the play calling was a lot more conservative in the second.
I don't know if you can ever describe a Jalen Hurts called run play as conservative.
I was questioning.
I have trouble saying that.
I am questioning more why they've had Jalen Hurts on the design run call with the game well in hand. They
trust him not to fumble more than they trust Miles Sanders not to fumble.
But now to Jody's point, I'm going to throw this stat at you, and this is a reason, and people are going to call me a hater, but whatever. They always call me a hater. This is why I temper something on Jalen Hurts. So this is from Next Gen Stats, the NFL's own, advanced analytics site. The average NFL receiver got 2.9 yards of separation last week. Dallas Goedert, 5.3. Zach Pascal, 4.82. Quez Watkins, 4.63. A.J. Brown, 3.72. These guys were wide open by NFL standards. That was my eye test. I said, this is amazing how open these receivers are. Jalen Hurts is a good football player. He should be hitting these guys with ease. I mean, that's not going to happen every week, though.
It's the effect of, and it happened on the Irv Smith drop, is the attention went to Jefferson. When he crossed the eye plane of the safety got stopped for a second and saw Jefferson and said, oh, there's Justin Jefferson. And that's what happens. When A.J. Brown is now on the field, these guys have less attention on them all over. Now
A.J. was wide open. You think A.J.'s getting all – A.J., 3.72, and he's getting all the attention. This was
now it's incumbent
coverage. That's all I'm saying.
I'll take Gill's point. I'll take Gill's point and run with it, though, because I think he's right. He just got a narrow focus in the other direction. It's not A.J. Brown. It's Jalen himself. The other defensive backs have to be aware that, this guy could tuck and run and turn up.
Yeah.
The one time they didn't do it, who was on him? I forget. Jesus. Who was on Goddard on the Hurts touchdown?
I don't know.
Yeah, one of the safety, I think,
followed me in the press box. I was closer.
No, the safety was actually right there. He was staring at Goddard. He had his back turned to Jalen Hurts.
Yeah,
that's why Jalen turned it up and said, shoot, I'm going to try and score a touchdown. He could have just danced out of bounds for the first down. He said, this guy isn't even looking at me.
Goddard.
On that particular play, it wasn't the kind of defense they've been playing all day.
No, Goddard was in motion and went out like he was, and then just kept pushing the guy, and the guy was following him as if he was guarding him. And Hurts just said, "Okay, I'll follow you guys up the sideline." But that guy never turned. Right, Goddard just kept pushing him down the field, and that was a hell of a run. I'm watching the game.
Yeah, that was a hell of a run.
Yeah, I'm watching the game with my girlfriend's son. He's 16 years old in high school, and he's saying, how do 4 grown men not pull down another guy like that? And I said, it's just, absolute will. He willed himself to get into the end zone at that point.
And the one knucklehead is trying to strip him at the 2-yard line instead of trying to bring him down. So,
see a lot of that.
Yeah.
Marcus Epps is becoming notorious for trying to be the guy who comes in with the shoulder and, jar the ball out and not wrap. He's doing that a lot.
Well, to finish this point, because Tone asked, doesn't that just mean the receivers are that good? No, to Tone, no. The average NFL, that's my point. That changes this week. The Eagles have very good receivers. Don't get me wrong. Those numbers I just gave you are absurd, are absurdly poor. And that's kind of my point. That's not going to be the normal way of doing things. That's why the NFL does these next-gen stats. The NFL average of separation, that's generally where you're going to be. Maybe you have great receivers, you have a little bit more. You don't have 2.9 to 5.2. That's not going to happen this week. I guarantee it. And Washington doesn't even have a great
secondary.
defense.
No, they don't.
But it's going to be better than that. So it becomes more difficult. That's why I'm saying, people, look, the other side the Eagles played really well. The other side played really, really poorly. So,
well, let me ask you this, John. I know you covered the Vikings for a couple of years and know that team pretty well. Where in the NFC pantheon do they lay? Are they a middle-of-the-road team? Is that a playoff team? You got 7 playoff teams, so, I mean, they may be a 7, but I don't know. Is that a team that you're like, hey, that's one of the better teams in the conference?
No. That is I just tell Jody, that's going to be a bottom 10 defense at best. I think Detroit's more talented now. I think Green Bay, even though they beat Green Bay in week 1, I think Aaron Rodgers will figure it out. Aaron, you know, I've been talking to you forever. You know how much respect I have for Aaron Rodgers. Jody knows it too. He will figure it out.
Well, and what we get lured into in this fantasy football world is that Minnesota has fantasy stars all over the place.
Exactly.
So therefore, they must be a good team. And that's why I asked that question to kind of put it in perspective, John, is Minnesota a really good team? Not necessarily. They have some really good skill players, but overall, they're probably a middle-of-the-road team, 9-8, 8-9.
Yeah, and a lot, I don't know what Kevin O'Connell is. Nobody does. I know he had a bad game in Philadelphia. He's a rookie head coach. That happens. Maybe he figures it out. Maybe they're a little bit better from that perspective. They should be a borderline wild card team.
Hey, I'll say this. Somebody's getting in. The Giants, Detroit, somebody that had because if Minnesota's not getting in, maybe Arizona. I mean, I do a segment called Who's In, Who's Out, where I try to pick the 14 playoff teams. It's hard, man. It is hard to find a 7th team in each conference to make the playoffs. You're getting to the point where you have to consider Detroit, the Giants, I don't know, probably Arizona. I think you're getting to that level of team. If Minnesota's not one of them, you're really dropping down to that level of team.
As I said, they'll be in the conversation to be that last wild card. So they might, but they're not a great team. They're not a terrible team. The Eagles deserve credit. They played very, very well. I'm just saying, just pump the brakes a little bit, because there are larger tests moving forward, starting this week, from a team that people would say on paper isn't as good, but they know the Eagles, they know how they play, they're going to be better prepared. And I think this week's going to be a more difficult matchup for the Eagles than
Minnesota. I disagree with you on that one, Mike. I think the NFC is easy to figure out. Look at the 7 teams that made it last year. And if you got to add someone from the outside in, I put New Orleans in. Now, the Tampa defense did a really good job against them the other day. They made Jameis 2022 look like Jameis 2019. He coughed it up a bunch of times. But, I can tell you who the teams are going to be in playoffs in the NFC. It's going to be the same teams as last year. And New Orleans will supplant someone else.
Well, Dallas made it last year. That would be one possibly, if depending on Dak. They looked pretty good defensively last week, obviously. This week, the Giants-Dallas game should be pretty interesting. But, look, I just feel like there's not a lot of – even on the other side. I mean, the AFC's got a couple teams at the top, but trying to find the 7th team, I was like, my gosh. I mean, I guess Denver right now would be – but they don't look all that special.
Yeah, but I mean, it is early, and somebody's gonna get better.
Sure, it all will be fluid.
Yeah. And some teams are going to move on. So I'm going to give, I mentioned this before, our buddy Jeff Kerr. And to give Jeff credit, he did say regular season games, but he put up Jalen Hurts' stats in his last 5 regular season starts. They're just phenomenal. And the Eagles are 5-0. But there was another game over that span, and that was the playoffs in Tampa Bay. And Todd Bowles, I'm surprised nobody's looked at that film and said, all right, this is how we do it. Now, maybe they think they don't have the talent to pull it off, and that's potential. Does that Todd Bowles game plan worry you at all? Or
I don't know.
there's not
Everybody's
enough
using Vic Fangio's defense. So for
Yeah.
whatever reason, they haven't matriculated over to Todd Bowles' defense at this
Yeah.
point. I don't know why. I will throw this into the mix. There's a guy who listens to my show who hates the Eagles, and he said, I don't know why everyone's so excited. You know, they lost on prime time games by an average of 16.5 points last year.
What is that?
Does that show? I said, what does that have to do with anything? But does it show the difference between where this team was and where this team is that they've made huge strides talent-wise so that the 16.5 points a game last year doesn't mean skedaddle, right?
Well,
they have upgraded the roster significantly.
That's like saying they're winning by 17 points on primetime games this year by an average.
One.
Right.
Yeah.
They played one so far.
Yeah.
All right. One other guy I think we got to throw some props to, and John just kind of rained on his parade that the Vikings left them as open as they did. Dallas Goedert, again, has had 2 good games in a row, started the season with outstanding production. We knew that he was going to be one of those key guys. What is it that the head coach likes to say, John? In order, we go from
AJ Dallas, AJ Dallas Devontae is what the Eagles' progression scale is.
And then once again, we're going to throw it over the top to Quez. That's all you need to know. And, the Goedert is not only going to be open, but he's going to make the catch. And he's going to turn it upfield and get more yards after the catch, which is something that he is certainly better in than Zach Ertz. We all love Zach Ertz, but that was never his strong suit, yards after catch.
Although he did have the first drop of the night on maybe the best pass of the day.
Yeah. That wasn't a drop. That got stripped out. One of the few times Viking defenders were near Dallas Goedert.
Jody, I am a huge Goedert fan. In fact, last year when they traded Ertz, I thought that there was a chance he could get to 1,000 yards. They kind of he was on pace to start to get there, a little off, but towards the end he faded a little bit. But I think right now he's one of the premier receiving guys in the league. You saw he can block. They like him blocking as well. He's a tremendous weapon in this offense. I think people forget, he was a second-round pick, and it gets lost in the sauce because Ertz was here, and he didn't get right on the field and burst out. But this guy has got a ton of talent, and as you mentioned, he can catch. He can run after the catch. Last year, I think he had the highest average yards per catch for tight ends in the league. He's a big play guy. He's a tremendous weapon that just gets kind of overshadowed, I think, because, Ertz was here when he got here, so he didn't make an immediate 1,000-yard impact. But I think if you featured him and he could probably be a 1,000-yard tight end.
I got this from Rube, our buddy Ruben Frank stats this morning. Last year he was the number 1 tight end, average yards per target. This year, he's the leading receiver in the National Football League. Not tight end, any receiver, yards per target. He's numero uno in the NFL. So as good as he was last year, he's better this year.
And Jody said I was hating on Dallas Goedert. No, I say Dallas Goedert. And you remember, Jody, when I did my top 25 Eagles, who was number 1? Number one was Dallas Goedert.
You were hating on Goedert?
You just said I was hating on Dallas Goedert because of the Vikings not. And I always say Dallas Goedert is always open.
No, I said you were hating on all the wide receivers. I did not individually pick out Goedert.
And he's always open. He's just not always going to be open by 5 yards average. Does
he have a sign hanging in his locker?
Always open. AJ's open. The Eagles receivers.
Does Goedert have one? Does Goedert have the sign?
Not yet, but he probably could.
Pretty soon, you're going to need to be handing out signs to everybody because you're not going to be able to pick who to defend. Look,
and by the way, same people in Miami I've seen, and Jody knows, good friend Alan Pouper covers the Dolphins, not the biggest Tua fan. People are saying the same thing down there.
Can you text him this week and ask him how the crow tastes for him? Will you do that for me, please?
Well, same name, a lot of open receivers, a lot of blown coverages. That has been a theme in the NFL, blown coverages over the first couple weeks. And it's interesting for all these teams that play zone. Why are you playing so much zone if the design is to be safe when everybody's blowing coverages?
Blown coverages anyway.
Yeah.
Well, I think we also asked on Friday, can Devonta Smith, if needed, if they said, we're going to take Brown out of the game, it looked like he's a guy who can get himself open, step up, make catches, keep the chains moving. So I think that was another question that got kind of answered in the game, is that Smith is pretty darn good as well.
Oh, yeah.
All right, last one for me, Mike.
Never worried about that, Mike. Never worried about that. Devontae's a very good receiver.
Last one for me, Mike Gill. Darius Slay was just named. John told us for the 20 seconds that your screen went down on us, he noticed that Darius Slay got Defensive Player of the Week, as well he should have. Kirk Cousins foolishly continued to try and throw at Mr. Slay on Monday night. Thank you very much, Kurt. That's why you are the definition of an average quarterback in the National Football League. Will Carson Wentz do the same? Does Carson try and bully ball his way to getting plays against Slay and pay the same price that Kirk Cousins did?
Well, if he doesn't, he'll do it at least one time. I mean, he could be blitzing everybody most of the game, and then in that moment, I'm sure he'll look at Slay's way one time at least, and that could be the moment because, Wentz – John, you might have brought this up yesterday. I don't remember who it was, but said, Wentz is the second most productive quarterback in the league right now behind Tua. He's had a pretty good start in terms of piling up the yards, the touchdowns, but he keeps making that one mistake in the game, which has kind of hampered him in the second part of his, tenure. I mean, that 2020 season was such I don't know. I mean, he hasn't been that bad. Last year in Indianapolis, he wasn't that bad. 2020, he was just horrendous.
Yeah.
I
don't know what happened. I still don't know what happened.
Yeah, he has been more of the 18, 19, 21 version of himself. And I don't know that we'll ever in fact, I'm pretty confident saying we'll never see the 2017 version of him. But in 16, 18, 19, 21, you saw a guy that can make throws, make plays, but have an occasional mistake. And I would imagine that will probably be a possibility again this weekend.
Yeah, and it might be the difference in the game. At Mike Gill Show, follow Mike on Twitter, the Sports Bash, every day, 2 to 6. I'm on there Monday through Thursday, 3 o'clock. So tune in for that if you're down the shore. Let's get you out of here on a Commander's question. Terry McLaurin, for whatever reason, I've always thought he's one of the best receivers in football. One of the reasons why so much upheaval at the quarterback position keeps producing, no matter who it is, production. If he was ever with a high volume quarterback, and Carson Wentz has been that for 2 weeks, we'll see if it continues. How good is Terry McLaurin?
Oh, big fan. And I like Dotson on the other side now, too. Logan Thomas is a tight end. They've got some weapons. I don't think they flash. They don't jump off the page like Jefferson, Thielen, Dalvin Cook. But I think he's better than it's hard to say right now that anybody's better than Amon-Ra St. Brown. But I think he's like a notch above where he is in terms of speed and a playmaker. Their problem, as you mentioned, is they haven't had anybody consistently be able to get them the ball. So Wentz is putting up some numbers there. I think the disappointment for them, I like McLaurin. Their run game is iffy. Their line is okay. I've been disappointed for 2 years now with that defense. I don't know. That defense 2 years ago looked like they were going to be something special. And I know Young's hurt, but, man, they put a lot of draft capital into that defense. And that defense got them to the playoffs that year and looked really good. And you're like, oh, man, you're going to have to deal with this defense. And I don't know what has happened to that defense. It is just not this dominating unit that we thought it could be. But McLaurin, probably, top 12? Is that good?
Yeah, that sounds about right. I would say I would agree with that. Borderline top 10. I wouldn't have a problem just leaving him out of the top 10. Very good receiver. I think very underrated because of where he plays.
Right. As long as Jamison Crowder's not here anymore, I feel like that guy killed us.
That's a good point.
He killed my Jets last year, but that's a whole nother story. And by the way, McLaurin only has 6 catches in the first 2 games. 22 yards a catch, but he's only had 6 catches so far. So a little bit of a big play aspect to his season in the first 2 games, his first 2 ever, the count with Carson Wentz. Mr. Gill, always a pleasure, buddy. Thanks for hopping on board. We will talk to you again next week.
All right, guys. See ya.